Good morning. You listen to FloorDaily.net, and I'm Kemp Harr. This morning, my guest is Steve Griffith, who's the Chief Marketing Officer with Invista. Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Kemp, for having me.
Yes, good to be with you. This is a little bit bittersweet because next Tuesday is your last day in this business, and we're going to miss you. We've had some very interesting conversations. Some of them were debates. They've always been stimulating, and I'm going to miss having someone so engaged in the business. One of the reasons that I really enjoy you is because you're tuned into the consumer, and you've been the brand steward for Stainmaster for quite some time. We'll get to that in just a minute. A little background first, though. A lot of people joke about the fact that this floor covering, it's not rocket science material here, and yet you are a rocket scientist. Is that right?
That's right. I do have a degree in aerospace engineering, 9 years of engineering to get me ready to be a chief marketing officer. So I guess you could say that, yeah.
And yet your role here for the last 15 years or so has been to be the steward for the Stainmaster brand. So let's talk about Stainmaster from the very beginning and on through to now. I mean, Tom McAndrews, most people know, was probably the father of Stainmaster. He's the one that convinced DuPont to spend tens of millions of dollars, that little redheaded boy driving the fire truck back when television had 3 channels. And then John Carson took over, and then basically after that, you've been the steward for the brand, haven't you?
That's right, starting in about mid-'90s.
And one of the most frustrating things I've got to imagine is that in the tenure, probably starting with John Carson and on to you, the manufacturers started to backwards integrate and started getting into their own fiber production, right?
That's right. I wouldn't call it frustrating, though, Kemp. I think that was a natural evolution. The technology to produce fibers was becoming socialized, and it was a natural step for large manufacturers to get into fiber production. That just raised the bar on us and required us to really focus on innovation and focus on our brands, which I attribute to the longevity we've had in the industry.
Yeah, and just a quick read on the strength of the brand. Even today, when you poll consumers and ask them about floor covering, Stainmaster is the best-known brand, isn't it?
That's right, and it's kind of an interesting story, Kemp, because when we were with DuPont, the brand was DuPont Stainmaster, and of course the DuPont brand carried a lot of weight with consumers. And when we came with Invista, we of course lost the use of the DuPont brand, and it took us about 3 years, but today the overall awareness of Stainmaster by itself is over 90%. And more importantly, the level of trust and the commitment to our brand is about 3 times higher today than it was when we were using the DuPont brand. All of that is attributed to the strengthening the brand and the innovation that we have put in place.
Wouldn't you say, if you were just looking back, and you're stepping away from this business soon, wouldn't you say that this loss of focus on branding in some of the other areas of the business has been one of the reasons that we've gotten in such a focus on pricing, right?
I would agree with that. A brand is really a promise to the consumer that you're going to fulfill some unmet need that they have, and when you do that over and over, it builds trust. So without a brand, the competitive landscape gets leveled pretty quickly, and quickly it erodes to what color do you want or what's the price. And of course, I can't think of anybody in business that would rather be in a position of asking for a premium because of the investment they're making in their brand versus competing against price.
Yeah, I agree. So as you look back on your career, what are one or two of the major highlights?
I have to go back to the early 90s, mid-90s or so. The competitive landscape was pretty difficult. There were a lot of competing brands, and I'm sitting here with Gary Johnson. Gary and I led the launch of the Stainmaster Flooring Center Network, which back then was called the DuPont Flooring Center Network. Some 18 to 20 years later, that network is still growing strong because of the value that's been created and the commitment that we made to dealers. So I would have to raise that up as one of the highest.
That's actually one of your legacies, isn't it? As we look back on what Steve Griffith brought to business, I mean, your focus on building that network of retailers that are focused on that brand, that's part of what you smile and look back on, right?
It is, and obviously also launches like Tac Test and Pet Protect and some of the innovation that we brought along, which really was the reason why they created value for that network. But you're right. As you
look back, who are some of the people that have meant the most to you?
Well, when you've been in business 40-some years, you spend a lot of time with a lot of people, and of course I don't have time to talk about them all, but I would list a couple, and one of the first ones I would list, and he was just introduced to the Floor Covering Hall of Fame, and that's Fritz Munzinger. Fritz Munzinger ran Baker Brothers way back in the early 90s. He was the first Stainmaster flooring center, and he was a exclusive consultant to us from the mid-90s all the way through about a year and a half ago. So he has been instrumental. He's one of the ones that taught me what little I know about retail. He was very important to Invista and to my career in particular. The other guy that I would raise up there would be Tom Levi. Tom Levi is one of the better retailers in the industry and a student of retail and a real partner. And so we've done, the three of us, including Gary here sitting beside me, have done a lot of things over the years.
As I look at you, Steve, you got white hair. It didn't ever let go like it did with me, but it is white. What drove you to have white hair?
Well, I could make a joke and talk about the industry and talk about a few people in particular, but actually it's genetic. Everybody in my family had white hair starting in their early 30s.
Well, we're going to miss you in this business. We really are. And do you have any advice for the young people that are coming along in this business?
Well, I can tell you what made us a success over the years. It was taking a market-backed view, meaning the insight in terms of what creates value, and that includes the consumer, but it also includes the path to purchase, which is retail. And then the other thing is drive innovation. Innovation and creating a differentiated position and one that solves somebody's problem is what sustains you that long. And that's why some of the products that we have branded Stainmaster are continued to do so well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Steve, I know you live outside of Atlanta. What are you going to do starting on Wednesday? Are you going fishing, or we're going to see you somewhere else in the business?
Well, you may see me somewhere else in the business. I've had a couple of offers to do some work, but we'll take that one step at a time. I'm lucky enough to have had 2 new grandchildren this past year. I have 2 granddaughters 3 days apart. Right now they're keeping me pretty busy. So beyond that, I haven't really looked that far out in the future.
All right, great. Well, it's good to talk to you, and best of luck to you as you retire. Again, been talking to Steve Griffith, who's leaving Invista as the Chief Marketing Officer after 35 years. And you've been listening to Kemp Harr and FloorDaily.net.